He laughed while signing the divorce papers, slid them across the table, leaned back, and told his lawyer it was the cheapest exit he'd ever made. He was giving her the old car, $1,200 a month, and $40,000 to walk away from 19 years. She sat across from him in a secondhand blouse and said nothing. Then the judge opened a file his lawyers had never seen. His wife's verified net worth, $11.7 million, built in silence over 12 years, under a name he never thought to look up, inside a business he never knew existed. But here's what no one in that courtroom expected. The money wasn't even the real secret. She'd been preparing for this moment since the night she found out about his first affair. And the woman sitting quietly across from him? She wasn't broken. She was finished building. Before we get into this one, tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? I want to hear it. Now let's begin. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and old carpet. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. Marcus Delane sat at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, one arm draped over the back of his chair like he was waiting on a late flight and wasn't all that bothered about it. His attorney leaned in close, whispering something that made Marcus chuckle, a low, satisfied sound that carried across the room. Nadine Delane sat on the other side of the room and did not look at her husband. She wore a pale blue blouse she'd bought secondhand from a consignment shop in East Point. She'd pressed it the night before. Her hands rested in her lap, folded, still. Her face gave away nothing. Not fear, not grief, not the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from 19 years of being invisible in your own home. She had practiced this stillness for a long time. She was very good at it now. Marcus had not practiced stillness a day in his life. He had moved Sienna Cole, his business partner, his girlfriend of 3 years, the woman he didn't bother hiding anymore, into a downtown Atlanta condo 6 months ago. He'd used marital funds to buy it. He'd posted vacation photos with her from Tulum, from Miami, from a wine country weekend that Nadine saw on her phone at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night while Zuri was asleep down the hall. He hadn't even changed his privacy settings. He hadn't seen the need. His attorney slid the divorce terms across the table. Nadine's attorney, a slender woman with tortoiseshell glasses named Denise Warwick, reviewed the documents without expression. The terms were brief and blunt. Nadine would receive the 2014 Hyundai Sonata with 87,000 miles on it, $1,200 a month for 2 years, a payout of $40,000. That was it. 19 years, 2 children, $40,000, and an old car. Marcus picked up the pen with a small flourish and signed his name. He slid the papers back across the table and leaned toward his attorney. Not quietly, not with any attempt at discretion, and said, "Cheapest exit I ever made." He actually laughed when he said it. Nadine didn't flinch. She didn't look at him. She kept her hands in her lap and waited. Judge Lorraine Achebe sat at the bench with the particular stillness of someone who had been watching people perform confidence in her courtroom for 30 years. She wore silver reading glasses on a beaded chain. She picked up the financial disclosure file that Nadine's attorney had submitted and began to read. The room was quiet. The judge's expression did not change. She turned a page. She read. She turned another page. "I'm looking at the petitioner's verified financial disclosure," Judge Achebe said. Her voice was calm and even, the way a body of water is calm, deep and still, and not something you'd want to test. She paused. Verified net worth of $11.7 million. The air left the room. Marcus's laugh died in his throat. It didn't taper off or trail into silence. It simply stopped, mid-breath, like a power cut. His smile collapsed. He turned to his attorney, and his attorney had already gone pale, already straightening in his chair, already reaching for a legal pad with the focused urgency of a man buying time. "Your Honor, we'd like to request a brief recess." Nadine hadn't moved. She sat in her secondhand blouse with her hands in her lap and her eyes forward and her face composed into perfect, patient stillness. $11.7 million, said out loud in a Fulton County courtroom on a Tuesday morning. Marcus stared at her. For the first time in a very long time, he was looking directly at his wife. She did not look back. 12 years earlier, Nadine Okafor, she still thought of herself that way, still, even then, sat at the kitchen table at 1 a.m. and stared at a phone number she didn't recognize. She'd found it in the pocket of a jacket Marcus left by the door. She'd called it from the landline after the children were asleep. A woman picked up on the second ring. The woman said hello twice before she realized who was calling, and then she hung up without a word. She didn't need to say anything. The pause before she hung up said everything. Nadine set the phone down. She did not cry. Not yet, not that night. She looked down the hallway at the thin strip of light under Aiden's door. He was 5 years old. He had his father's forehead and her mother's nose, and he slept with a small stuffed elephant named Gerald that was missing one eye. Down the hall in the other direction, Zuri was asleep in her crib, barely 2 years old, with her mother's exact hands curled under her chin. Nadine sat at the kitchen table and made the only decision that mattered. She would not leave. Not yet. But she would never. Not one more day, not one more year, be powerless. Her grandmother had kept formulas in a spiral notebook with a water-stained cover. Natural hair care recipes passed down from women who couldn't afford the products sold to them. Shea and jojoba and castor oil, combinations tested in kitchens and church bathrooms and beauty shops. Nadine had grown up watching those formulas work. She'd been meaning to do something with them for years. She started that week. Small batches first, mixed in mason jars on the same kitchen table. She labeled them by hand. Clean, simple, precise. She sold 6 jars at the Sunday church fair and made $48. She sold 12 more the following week. She sold them under her maiden name, Nadine Okafor. She filed the LLC 3 months later at the county clerk's office on her lunch break, the children at daycare, Marcus at a networking dinner. She got a P.O. box on the same day. She never used a single dollar from their joint account. Marcus never asked where she went on Saturdays. He never asked about the packages stacked near the back door or the spreadsheets she closed when he walked into the room. He came home, he ate dinner, he talked about his deals and his contacts and his plans, and he looked at his wife in her apron and he saw exactly what he expected to see. He never once thought to look further. The years moved quietly. A first wholesale order from a salon supply distributor in Decatur, a small warehouse in College Park that she leased under the LLC name. Ray Campbell, steady, loyal, never asked unnecessary questions, hired to manage it. $3.8 million in annual revenue, distribution in over 600 stores across the Southeast. The brand name, Nadine Naturals, printed on every label. Her grandmother's formulas inside every jar. Her mother had told her once, "The quietest roots hold the tallest trees." Nadine had written that in the margin of the first LLC filing and looked at it every time she felt afraid. Back in the courtroom, Marcus was on his feet. His attorney had gotten his recess, and now Marcus was leaning toward Nadine across the gap between their tables. His voice dropped low and furious, asking her how she'd hidden it, how long she'd been lying. His eyes were wide with a disbelief that looked almost like hurt. Nadine looked at her husband for the first time that morning. "I wasn't hiding," she said quietly. "I was building. You just never asked what I was building." She turned back to face the judge's bench. Marcus had no answer for that. He had never once asked. 3 days after the courtroom, Marcus Delane sat in Gerald Price's Buckhead office and did not mention that he had laughed. Price's office was the kind of room that was designed to remind you of money. Dark wood panels, framed settlement certificates, a view of Peachtree Road that cost something just to look at. Price himself was 52, heavy-set with monogrammed cufflinks and the measured calm of a man who had won enough ugly cases to stop feeling bad about it. He listened to Marcus with his hands folded and his face neutral. Marcus said that his wife had deceived him for over a decade. He said she had used the stability he provided. the house, the income, the security of a two-parent home, to quietly build a multi-million-dollar operation without his knowledge or consent. He said that any business built during a marriage belonged to both spouses. He said he wanted half. Price nodded slowly. "We'll file to reclassify Nadine Naturals as a marital asset," he said. "Subpoena her financial records, supplier contracts, warehouse lease, every filing going back to the beginning. We make her prove, document by document, that not $1 of marital funds touch that business." He paused. "And while she's doing that, we make her secrecy the story. Once a judge sees a wife who hid millions from her husband for 12 years, the sympathy disappears." He looked at Marcus steadily. "We don't have to prove she stole anything. We just have to make her look like she did." Marcus sat back. For the first time in 3 days, the tightness in his chest loosened a degree. The subpoenas arrived at Nadine's house on a Thursday evening in a thick manila envelope. She stood in the front hallway and read the cover sheet without sitting down. Then she called Denise Warwick. Denise didn't soften it. She told Nadine that Price was one of the most aggressive divorce litigators in the Atlanta metro area, that this would cost money and time she hadn't planned for, and that the fight for Nadine Naturals had just officially begun. Nadine listened without interrupting. That night, she drove to the warehouse alone. She let herself in through the back, turned on the overhead lights one section at a time, and walked the shelves slowly. 12 years of work stacked floor to ceiling. Shea butter bombs and edge controls and deep conditioners in amber jars, each one labeled by hand, each formula still her grandmother's. The warehouse smelled like coconut oil and cardboard and something underneath that she could only describe as years. She ran one hand along a shelf and stood still in the quiet. She thought about Price in his Buckhead office, deciding how to make her look. She thought about Marcus signing those papers with a grin. She thought about a kitchen table at 1 a.m. and a decision she'd made when she had nothing and everything to lose. Then she pulled out her phone and called Denise back. "I'm not settling," she said. Her voice was level. "He can subpoena everything I have, every record, every filing, every dollar. I've got nothing to hide." She looked out at the rows of shelves, all of it hers, all of it earned. "I'll fight for every jar." On the other end of the line, Denise was quiet for just a moment, the way someone gets quiet when they hear exactly what they needed to hear. "Then that's what we'll do," she said. Nadine turned off the warehouse lights and drove home through the Atlanta night. Marcus was already planning his next move. He had no idea she'd been planning hers for 12 years. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't put prices on the menu. Marcus had chosen it deliberately. He wanted Aiden to feel the leather booth, to taste the dry-aged steak, to understand, without being told directly, which parent could give him this and which one couldn't. Aiden was 17. He was tall like his father and watchful like his mother, and he sat across from Marcus in the expensive sneakers Marcus had bought him last month, trying to look comfortable in a room where he wasn't sure he belonged. Marcus leaned back and started talking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He spoke the way he always spoke when he wanted something. Smooth, reasonable, like a man simply sharing facts. He said that Nadine had been lying to him for 12 years, that she'd hidden millions of dollars while he worked himself half to death to keep the family stable, that she'd used the security of their marriage, his income, his name, his sacrifice, as a launch pad for her secret empire, and never once told him the truth. He did not mention Sienna. He did not mention the downtown condo. He did not mention Tulum or Miami or the photos Nadine had seen on her phone at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Aiden listened. He wanted his father to be telling the truth. It was easier, so much easier, than the alternative. He started pulling away from Nadine quietly, the way teenagers do, in increments that felt small until they added up. Shorter answers at breakfast, canceled plans. 3 Sundays in a row, he texted that he wasn't coming to dinner. Nadine read each message and set the phone down and went back to whatever she was doing because she had decided she would not fall apart in front of her children. Zuri noticed before Nadine admitted it to herself. She was 14 and small, and she saw everything. She cornered Aiden in the hallway one Thursday evening and told him flat out that Dad was lying, that she could feel it, that he needed to stop letting Marcus use him like this. Aiden told her she didn't know what she was talking about and walked out. Zuri stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then she went to the kitchen and started doing dishes, because that was what her mother would have done. That same night, Nadine sat across from Colette at the kitchen table, both of them wrapped in the specific kind of quiet that comes after midnight. Colette had driven over after her shift at Grady. She still had her hospital badge clipped to her jacket. "Tell them," Colette said. "Tell them what he did, what he's been doing." "They're his children too," Nadine said. "Nadine. I won't win my kids by destroying their father." She looked at her hands, her grandmother's formula absorbed into the skin. "That's not winning." Colette didn't push further. She knew when Nadine had made up her mind. The following Sunday, Aiden canceled again. Zuri set 2 plates instead of 3 and sat down at the table before her mother had to ask. Nadine looked at her daughter, this quiet, unshakable girl, and felt something crack and hold at the same time. She was losing one child to a story she wasn't allowed to correct, and the other one was sitting right here, refusing to move. Marcus had no idea what he'd started, but he was about to find out it wasn't enough. The segment aired on a Thursday morning. Metro Pulse, a local Atlanta outlet that ran on community gossip and advertiser goodwill, posted it at 7 a.m. under the headline, "Secret Millionaire Wife Deceives Husband in Bitter Divorce." By noon, it had 40,000 views. The segment ran 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It featured a photo of Nadine from the county court records. No context, no comment from her side. And an unnamed source described as close to the family, who said Marcus had been blindsided by his wife's secret financial life. The word deception appeared 4 times. Sienna Cole's name appeared 0 times. The downtown condo appeared 0 times. The Tulum photos appeared 0 times. The comments filled in what the segment left out, and none of it was kind. By Friday, 2 of Nadine's retail partners had called. A regional chain in the Southeast, one of her biggest accounts, told her they were pausing their contract pending resolution of the media situation. A boutique distributor in Charlotte said the same thing in different words. Nadine thanked them both and hung up and stared at the wall for exactly 30 seconds. Then she called Ray. Ray Campbell had been managing her warehouse for 8 years. He answered on the first ring. He already knew. He'd seen the segment, fielded 3 nervous calls from suppliers by 9 a.m., and had a handwritten list of every account that had gone quiet. He read it to her without editorializing. It was a long list. "We keeping the lines running?" he asked. "Every single one," she said. That afternoon, one of her suppliers called Ray directly to request accelerated payment, citing financial instability concerns. Ray handled it. He always handled it. That was the thing about Ray. He didn't need to understand every detail of what was happening to know his job was to hold the floor steady while Nadine figured out the ceiling. But that evening, alone in the parking lot outside the warehouse, Nadine sat in her car and fell apart. Not loudly, not dramatically. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and the tears came hard and fast, and she let them. Because there was no one watching, and she'd been holding it for weeks, and some things have to go somewhere. She thought about 12 years of early mornings and late nights and church fairs and jars she'd labeled by hand. She thought about Aiden's empty chair at the Sunday table. She thought about 40,000 strangers reading the word deception next to her name. She was so tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Her phone rang. Denise. "He's trying to bleed you out," Denise said, no preamble. The media story, the retail pressure, the supplier calls, it's coordinated. He wants you desperate before we get back to court. A pause. "It's working, Nadine. We have to name that." Nadine wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked at the warehouse through the windshield. Her warehouse, her building, her name on every jar inside it. She got out of the car. She walked back through the door, past Ray's desk where his handwritten list still sat, past the shelves of product that represented 12 years of quiet, stubborn work. "Not a single line," she told Ray. He nodded once. That was enough. Marcus had tried to make her look small in public. What he didn't know, what he had never known, was that Nadine Delane did not break in parking lots. She just allowed herself to bend, alone, where no one could see. Then she walked back in. Something was coming. She didn't know yet what Denise had found, but it was coming. Denise Warwick's office in East Point did not look like the kind of place where empires fell. It was small and fluorescent lit, with file boxes stacked against one wall and a dying potted plant in the corner that she kept meaning to throw away. Her desk was buried under paper. Her second pair of black pumps, the ones she kept telling herself she'd buy, still didn't exist. It was almost 11 at night when she found it. She'd been working through Marcus's financial disclosures for 3 hours. His team had submitted them as required by the contested proceedings, dense, technical, formatted to look complete while revealing as little as possible. Denise read documents the way she argued cases, slowly, methodically, looking for the thing that wasn't supposed to be there. The property in Savannah almost looked like nothing. A commercial holding listed under an LLC called Coal Ventures, registered to Sienna Coal. Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention to the transfer history. Denise was always paying attention. She pulled the public records. Coal Ventures had been capitalized through a series of wire transfers from 2 separate accounts, both traceable, with the right forensic eye, back to Marcus Delane. She pushed her glasses up her nose and pulled the thread further. It unraveled fast. Cryptocurrency accounts, 2 additional shell LLCs, the Savannah property, all of it routed through Sienna's name, all of it funded from Marcus's side of the ledger, none of it disclosed. $1.6 million hidden in plain sight behind a woman Marcus had convinced was his partner. Denise sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. Then she called her forensic accountant, a meticulous woman named Patricia, who charged more than Denise could comfortably afford, and told her she needed everything documented, time-stamped, and court-ready. Patricia said she'd start in the morning. Denise said she needed her to start tonight. The next morning, Denise drove to Nadine's house and laid it all out on the kitchen table. Nadine listened without speaking. She looked at the printed records, the transfer logs, the LLC filings with Sienna's name at the top and Marcus's money at the bottom. She looked at it for a long time. The irony was almost too heavy to say out loud. Marcus had spent weeks telling the world, telling her children, telling the media, telling anyone who would listen, that Nadine was the one hiding assets, the one running a secret financial life inside their marriage, the one who couldn't be trusted. And all along, he had been hiding $1.6 million through his mistress. "We go public with this," Nadine said. It wasn't quite a question. Denise shook her head. "We save every piece of it for the courtroom." She tapped the folder on the table. "Out here, it's a story. In there, it's evidence. We don't give him a single chance to spin it or prepare for it." She looked at Nadine steadily. "When we walk in for the final hearing, this is the last thing he sees coming." Nadine looked down at the papers, at Sienna's name, at the money Marcus had hidden while accusing her of hiding. She nodded slowly. She had been patient for 12 years. She could be patient a little longer. The courtroom was coming, and when it did, Denise Warwick was going to be ready. Marcus had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of that door. Marcus Delane did not know how to lose quietly. He had never learned. Every setback in his life had been met with the same response. Press harder, move faster, turn up the heat until the other side flinched first. It had worked in real estate. It had worked in every negotiation he'd ever been in. He saw no reason it wouldn't work here. He started making calls. He didn't use his own name. He positioned himself as a concerned party, someone with insight into the ongoing litigation around Nadine Naturals, just passing along information that retail partners deserved to know. He was smooth about it. He always was. 3 of Nadine's largest remaining accounts received calls within the same week, each one carefully worded, each one planting the same seed. The company was legally unstable. The founder was under scrutiny. The smart move was to wait and see. One account didn't wait. A regional chain with 200 stores across the Southeast, 15% of Nadine's annual revenue, sent a termination notice by certified mail. Contract suspended pending resolution of ongoing litigation. Nadine read the letter at her kitchen table and set it down without crumpling it. Ray found out 4 days later. A buyer at a mid-sized distributor, a woman named Teresa who had worked with Nadine Naturals for 6 years and liked Nadine enough to risk the call, tipped him off. She told him a man had called her boss twice, both times saying the same things, both times asking her boss not to mention it. Ray wrote down every detail in his neat, careful handwriting and drove to the warehouse before anyone else arrived. He put the notes on Nadine's desk without a word. When she came in, he was already at his post. She read it once. Then she called Denise. That same afternoon, Aiden showed up at the warehouse. He said he was there to pick up something for Marcus. Nadine didn't ask what. He stood just inside the loading dock door with his hands in his pockets, and she watched him look at the place for the first time. Really look. The production lines running. The employees in their blue aprons moving with the easy rhythm of people who had been doing this for years. The shelves stacked floor to ceiling, the boxes labeled with her name on every one. He looked like he was doing math in his head, like he was trying to reconcile 2 versions of a story and the numbers weren't adding up. He left without saying much, but his eyes were different when he walked out. That night, Nadine sat at Colette's kitchen table and said the words out loud for the first time. She said maybe it would be easier to settle, to take whatever Marcus offered, close the legal wound and spend the next 3 years rebuilding without the fight, draining what she'd built. She said she was so tired. Colette looked at her across the table the way only a woman who has known you for 20 years can look at you. "You didn't build this empire in secret," she said, "just to hand it over in public." Nadine was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Denise. She told her to file the motion documenting every call Marcus had made, every account he'd contacted, every word Teresa had reported. Document all of it. Tortious interference. Put it on the record. The counterattack had begun, and Marcus had made one call too many. Marcus's condo was all clean lines and low lighting, the kind of place designed to impress people passing through rather than anyone actually living there. Aiden had been staying in the guest room for weeks. He told himself it was because his dad needed him around. He knew, somewhere deeper than that it was because going home meant admitting something he wasn't ready to admit yet. He was in the hallway when he heard it. Marcus was on the phone with Sienna, door half open, voice relaxed, in the way it only got when he thought he was alone. He was laughing, the easy, satisfied laugh that Aiden had grown up associating with his father's good moods, his good deals, his good life. He heard the words, "bleeding her dry." He heard his father explain cheerfully that the Metro Pulse story had been his idea from the start. A gift, he called it, to the news cycle. He heard Sienna's voice through the phone, high and amused, asking if it was working. Marcus said, "Better than expected." Aiden stood in the hallway and did not move for a long time. He didn't confront his father. He was 17 and he was afraid, and he had enough of his mother in him to know that some truths needed to be carried quietly for a while before they could be spoken. He packed a bag the next morning while Marcus was at the gym and went home. He didn't announce it. He just walked into the kitchen, sat down at the counter, and watched Nadine label a small batch order. Her hands moved the same way they always had, steady, precise, smoothing each label flat with her thumb. She'd been doing this since before he could remember, and he had never once thought to ask why. "Tell me about the business," he said. She looked up at him. She didn't cry. She didn't say I told you so. She set down the jar she was holding and told him the story simply. From the beginning, no drama, no editorializing. The kitchen table 12 years ago, her grandmother's notebook, the first church fair, the P.O. box, the warehouse in College Park, the slow, steady climb that nobody saw because nobody looked. Aiden listened to every word. Zuri appeared in the doorway at some point, took one look at her brother sitting at the counter, and walked over and sat beside him without making a thing of it. "Glad you're home," she said very quietly. He didn't say anything back, but he didn't leave. Denise called that evening to confirm. The final hearing was scheduled. 3 weeks out. She had everything. The forensic accounting, the shell company documentation, Marcus's interference with the business accounts, the full 12-year paper trail of Nadine Naturals as separate, independent property. They were ready. The night before the hearing, Aiden stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at his mother. "I'm sorry I stopped coming to Sunday dinner," he said. She looked at her son, his father's height, her mother's eyes, all 17 years of him still trying to figure out who he was. Her heart was very full and very quiet at the same time. The table was always set, she said. Later, after the children were asleep, Nadine sat alone at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she didn't drink. The same table, the same room, the same hands that had mixed the first batch 12 years ago on a night just like this one. Dark and still and full of a decision waiting to be made. Tomorrow, the courtroom. She closed her eyes and breathed. She'd been preparing for this moment for 12 years without knowing exactly when it would come. Now it was here. She was ready. The courtroom looked the same as it had the first morning. Same fluorescent light, same lemon polish smell, same long table and high bench and weight of consequence hanging in the air. Nadine took her seat beside Denise and folded her hands in her lap, the same way she always had. Marcus sat across from her with Gerald Price at his shoulder. He was dressed sharply. He was always dressed sharply. And he touched his watch once before the session opened, adjusting it, angling it toward the light. Old habit. Nadine noticed and looked away. Price opened with confidence and the particular authority of a man who had won many rooms that looked like this one. He told the court that Nadine Naturals had been built during the marriage, that the domestic stability Marcus provided, the shared household, the 2 decades of partnership, constituted the foundation on which Nadine's business had grown. He used the word partnership 4 times. He argued, measured, and certain that equitable distribution required the court to recognize Marcus's contribution to the conditions that made the business possible. He asked for 50%. Then Denise stood up. She pushed her glasses up her nose, a small, quiet gesture that the other side didn't know to read as a warning. And she began. She laid out 12 years of documentation with the calm precision of someone who had been building this case from the moment she first looked at Nadine's paperwork and understood exactly what she was looking at. Bank records showing every dollar Nadine ever invested in Nadine Naturals came from her own earnings. Incorporation documents filed under Nadine Okafor, predating any joint financial activity. A separately leased warehouse, separately insured, operating entirely independent of any marital account. Tax filings, year by year, 12 in a row. Not one marital dollar, not one. She let the silence sit after that. Then she said she had one more matter to bring before the court. She requested permission to address the respondent's own financial disclosures. The judge granted it without hesitation, and Denise began to lay it out, slowly, piece by piece, the way you reveal something you want everyone in the room to fully absorb before the next piece arrives. Coal Ventures, the Savannah property, the wire transfers, the cryptocurrency accounts, the Shell LLCs with Sienna Coal's name at the top and Marcus Delane's money underneath. $1.6 million hidden from the court, hidden from his wife, routed through his mistress while he stood in this very building and called Nadine the dishonest one. The room was very still. The only person in this marriage who concealed assets, Denise said, her voice even and clear, was the one standing here accusing his wife of doing so. Marcus's jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. Heat crawled up the back of his neck, and he was working very hard to keep his face neutral, and he was not quite succeeding. Price leaned over and said something low in his ear. Then he rose and asked for a sidebar. Judge Achebe looked at him over her reading glasses. "Request denied," she said. Price sat back down. Nadine kept her hands folded in her lap and did not look at Marcus. She looked forward, the way she always had. The judge reached for her pen. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Achebe set down her pen and looked out at the courtroom. She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. The room had already gone so quiet that the hum of the ventilation system overhead was the only sound. That low, indifferent drone that didn't care whose life was about to change. She ruled on Nadine Naturals first. The business, she said, had been incorporated under Nadine Okafor's name before any joint financial activity with the respondent. It had been funded entirely from the petitioner's own earnings. It had operated from a separately leased facility with no marital capital at any point in its 12-year history. The documentation was complete, consistent, and uncontested by any credible counter-evidence. Nadine Naturals was the separate property of Nadine Delane. Marcus Delane had no claim. Marcus stared at the table. His jaw worked once, like he was going to say something. He didn't. The judge moved to the hidden assets. She laid out the sanctions with the same precision she'd used for everything else. Not angrily, not theatrically, just methodically, the way a doctor reads a chart. $1.6 million in undisclosed assets, Shell LLCs, the Savannah property, cryptocurrency accounts, all of it routed through Sienna Cole's name, all of it traceable, all of it documented. The failure to disclose was not an oversight, she said. It was a choice, and the court treated it accordingly. Marcus would pay Nadine $780,000 in restitution. He would forfeit the contested downtown Atlanta condo, the one he had purchased with marital funds and moved his mistress into while his wife was still in their shared home. His financial fraud was being referred to the Georgia State Bar and to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation. Price was motionless beside him. The monogrammed cufflinks caught the light once, and then his hands went still. Denise stood and presented one final document, a log of phone calls Marcus had placed directly to Nadine Naturals' retail accounts over a 6-week period, each call documented by date, recipient, and content. Tortious interference, she said, deliberate and calculated sabotage of a legitimate business operation. The judge noted it for the record and told Nadine she had strong grounds for a separate civil action. Then Judge Achebe paused in the way that made attorneys stop breathing. "Mr. Delane," she said, "contempt for a spouse's dignity is not a legal strategy. It is a character confession. This court has seen both today, and the record will reflect them equally." The room was silent. Marcus sat alone at the table as the session was called to close. Price gathered his files without speaking. People moved around Marcus the way water moves around something that has stopped. The room emptied. He stayed seated. In the hallway, Sienna Cole stood near the doors in her designer coat, arms crossed, waiting. She had come to watch Marcus win. Instead, a process server appeared at her elbow and placed a civil suit in her hands. She looked at the papers. She looked at Marcus as he finally emerged from the courtroom. Then she turned and walked away from him without a single word. Nadine stepped out into the Atlanta sunlight with Denise beside her, and the air felt different, cleaner, wider, like a window had been opened in a room that had been shut for a very long time. She tilted her face up toward it and breathed. She heard them before she saw them. Nadine came through the front door that evening to the smell of reheated soup and the sound of Zuri's voice in the kitchen, low and steady, talking to someone. She set her bag down in the hallway and stood very still for a moment because she already knew, from the particular quality of the silence between Zuri's words, that it was Aiden. She walked into the kitchen. Aiden stood at the stove with a dish towel over his shoulder and his back to the door, stirring something in the pot the same clumsy way he'd stirred things since he was 8 years old. The table was set for 3, not for Sunday, it was a Wednesday, but there were 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 chairs pulled out, and a candle in the center that Zuri had found somewhere and lit, because that was the kind of thing Zuri did without being asked. Aiden turned around. His eyes were red at the edges. He had his mother's watchful eyes, and right now they were watching her with something she hadn't seen in them for months. "I know what he did," he said. "All of it. The story he fed me. The calls to your accounts. I heard him on the phone." He stopped, swallowed. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I pulled away." Nadine crossed the kitchen and held her son. He was taller than her now and had been for 2 years, but he bent into her the way he used to when he was small, all the way, no holding back, and she felt the tension go out of him in one long, shuddering exhale. "You don't have to choose between us," she said into his shoulder. "You never did, but you deserve to know the truth, and now you do." Zuri was crying. She was trying not to, pressing the back of her hand against her mouth, the way Nadine had always done, when she didn't want anyone to see. Nadine pulled her in with the other arm, and for a moment the 3 of them just stood there in the kitchen. The same kitchen where it all started, 12 years ago and a lifetime ago, and held on. They sat down and ate reheated soup and bread. Simple food, the most ordinary meal in the world, and it was the most whole Nadine had felt in a year. After the children were in bed, she called her mother. She didn't say much. Her mother listened, and then she said the same thing she'd said all those years ago at the kitchen table when Nadine was just beginning. The quietest roots hold the tallest trees. And this time it landed differently. Not like encouragement, like confirmation, like a prophecy that had finally, fully come true. Colette sent a single text, "You did it." Nadine typed back, "We did." She sat at the kitchen table a little longer. She looked at the room. Then Aiden appeared in the doorway in his socks, half asleep, and said, "Mom, can I come see the warehouse? Like, really see it? And could I maybe work there this summer?" She smiled, a real smile, the kind that starts somewhere deep and rises all the way up. "It's yours too," she said. "It always was." She turned off the kitchen light. The house was quiet. The house was full. 6 months later, Nadine Delane stood at a podium in a conference center in Midtown Atlanta, in a room full of women she had never met and already recognized. She recognized the way they sat, careful, watchful, like people who had learned to take up less space than they needed. She recognized the ones in the back row who hadn't decided yet if they belonged here. She recognized herself in all of them, and she spoke directly to that. She told them she had built Nadine Naturals out of survival, out of a decision made at 1 a.m. at a kitchen table when she had nothing but her grandmother's notebook and the bone-deep certainty that she would not spend the rest of her life waiting to be seen. She told them she was lucky, that she had time and a skill, and 12 years nobody bothered to look. She told them not every woman got 12 years. That was why she was here. The Nadine Naturals Foundation launched that morning with $2 million in seed funding, microloans, business mentorship, and legal resources for married women, building independent financial futures. The mission was specific and it was personal. No woman should be financially trapped in a marriage because she never had the chance to build something of her own. Nadine wanted them to build out of choice, not survival, choice. Denise Warwick joined the foundation's board that same day. She would run pro bono legal clinics for women navigating financial abuse in divorce proceedings, the kind of clinics she wished had existed for her mother 20 years ago. She sat in the front row with her tortoiseshell glasses and her resold black pumps and her quiet, steady presence. And when Nadine looked at her during the speech, Denise gave one small, certain nod. Colette Baptiste was named Community Outreach Director. She accepted the role in the same matter-of-fact way she accepted everything. No ceremony, no fuss, just a firm handshake and the laugh lines deepening around her eyes. She already had 3 community partnerships lined up by the end of the week. The retail partners who had paused their contracts during the media storm had all returned, every one of them, and 3 new national chains had signed on in the months since the ruling. Nadine Naturals was now in over 1,000 stores, and the number was still climbing. The quietest woman in the room, Nadine told the crowd, might be the strongest one in it. I built this foundation so that woman never has to prove it alone. The applause was long and warm and real. Afterward, making her way through the lobby, Nadine noticed a young woman standing near the entrance. She was maybe 25, holding a Nadine Naturals product bag against her chest, the way you hold something you're not sure you're allowed to have. She looked up when Nadine approached, and her mouth opened, and she seemed to lose whatever she had planned to say. Nadine stopped. "Take your time," she said gently. "I'm not going anywhere." The young woman took a breath, and she began. What Marcus never understood, what he could never have imagined, was that this was always where it was going. Every jar she had ever labeled, every early morning, every year he hadn't looked, it was always going here. The office in Macon was the kind of space that apologized for itself. Drop ceiling, fluorescent tube overhead with a flicker in it that nobody had fixed, a metal desk with a laminate top, a rolling chair with one wheel that caught if you turned it too far left. The window looked out over a parking lot. Marcus Delane sat in that chair 6 days a week and managed rental properties for a company whose name was not his own. His real estate license had been suspended 4 months ago, pending investigation by the Georgia State Bar into fraudulent financial filings. His development firm in Atlanta had dissolved 6 weeks after the ruling, once the court records became public and his investors quietly, efficiently pulled out. He still had a lawyer, technically. The lawyer had stopped returning calls as promptly as he once had. Sienna Cole had settled the civil suit for an amount she did not discuss publicly and had severed all contact the same week. The Savannah property was liquidated as part of the settlement. The designer watches were still in a drawer somewhere at the condo he'd been forced to forfeit. He hadn't gone back for them. On a Thursday afternoon in November, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he recognized, a developer out of Buckhead, a man named Gordon, who had partnered with Marcus on 3 projects over the years, a man who had been at Marcus's table at charity dinners, who had shaken his hand and called him sharp and meant it. Marcus answered before the second ring. Gordon did not spend time on pleasantries. He said he'd been holding off making this call because he believed in giving a man a fair chance to rebuild. He said he had tried to keep an open mind. He said he was calling now because a mutual contact had approached him about bringing Marcus into a new project, and he needed to be honest about where things stood. "Your reputation isn't damaged, Marcus," Gordon said. His voice was not unkind. It was simply final. "It's accurate. Nobody in Atlanta is going to partner with you. Not because of what the court said, because of what you did." A pause. "I'm sorry it went this way." The line went dead. Marcus set the phone down on the laminate desk and sat very still. Through the window, the parking lot held a dozen unremarkable cars in the gray November light. Nothing moved. Somewhere down the hall, a copier started and stopped. He drove home on the interstate, 80 miles of Georgia highway with the radio off. On the outskirts of Macon, just past the overpass at exit 2, there was a billboard. He knew it was there. He had driven past it before and kept his eyes on the road. But today, for just a moment, he looked. Nadine Naturals, a new campaign. Nadine's face, full and radiant, looking out over the highway with the kind of quiet confidence that needed no explanation and sought no permission. Her name in clean type beneath it. The brand she had built in secret for 12 years, in the kitchen of the house they had shared, while he was out converting his appearance into everything he believed would last. He looked for exactly 2 seconds. Then the billboard was behind him, shrinking in the rearview mirror, and the road stretched ahead, and Marcus Delane kept driving into the gray and diminishing distance. He had laughed in that courtroom. He had called it the cheapest exit he'd ever made. He understood now what it had actually cost him. 3 years after the divorce, Essence magazine sent a photographer and a writer to Nadine's new house on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The house was sunlit. That was the first thing anyone noticed. The way the light came through the kitchen windows in long, warm panels, catching the countertops, the jars on the shelf, the hands of the woman who moved through the space like she had been there forever, like she had chosen every inch of it, because she had. She bought it with her own money, on her own terms, on a Tuesday morning not unlike this one. And she had not asked anyone's permission, and she had not needed to. The Nadine Naturals Foundation had funded 340 women entrepreneurs across Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas. 14 of those businesses had crossed $500,000 in annual revenue. 2 other states were modeling the program. Denise Warwick ran the legal clinics with the same surgical precision she brought to everything, and Colette Baptiste had built community partnerships in 6 cities, showing up to each one in a different pair of bold earrings and leaving every room warmer than she found it. Aiden was 20 now, a sophomore at Morehouse College, working part-time at the Nadine Naturals warehouse on weekends. The reconciliation between him and Nadine was real and still tender. Healing, not healed, which was honest, which was the only kind of healing worth having. He had his mother's watchful eyes, and he was learning, slowly, to trust what they showed him. Zuri was 17 and had started a small jewelry line the previous fall, selling at church fairs in Decatur and East Point. She had her mother's exact hands and her grandmother's instinct for making something out of nothing. She had priced her pieces carefully, kept her own records from the beginning, and had not needed anyone to tell her why. After the magazine crew packed their equipment and said their warm goodbyes and drove away down the street, Nadine stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, listening to the house settle into quiet. Then she opened the drawer beside the stove and reached to the back of it and pulled out a jar. It was the original formula, the same recipe from her grandmother's water-stained notebook. The same proportions she had worked out on this very table. A different table then, a smaller kitchen, a harder night. 12 years ago when she had nothing but a decision and the stubborn, private certainty that she would not be powerless forever. She sat down. She picked up a label from the stack beside her. Clean, simple, printed with the Nadine Naturals name just as it had always been. And she smoothed it onto the jar by hand, pressing it flat from center to edge with her thumb, the same way she had always done it, the way she would always do it, because some things you keep not out of necessity but out of love, and this was one of them. Marcus had laughed because he thought the papers were the end of her story. Nadine had known even then, sitting still in her secondhand blouse with her hands folded in her lap, that they were the first page of a chapter she had been writing in secret for 12 years. The sunlight caught her hands, the same table, bigger now, the same formula in 1,000 stores now, the same woman, everything else changed. If you've stayed with Nadine from that first courtroom morning all the way to this kitchen, then you already know the quiet ones are always worth watching. Subscribe so you never miss a story about the people the world underestimates. They almost always turn out to be the most interesting ones in the room.